Good Sunday afternoon, and welcome to another Southern Oregon Weather Weekend Update. I want to start by recapping the storm that blew through yesterday and offering a picture of the month as a whole. We'll look at our 7-day forecast, and then as usual, we'll discuss our teleconnections and what they mean for our mid- and long-range forecast. So yesterday was a very interesting day in terms of the weather because Medford, Roseburg, and Montague in California all set precipitation records for the date. Medford recorded 1.47 inches at the National Weather Service station at the airport, very unusual for this time of year. Overall, the forecast largely panned out as expected, except that thunderstorms didn't develop a Friday afternoon and evening for many areas, and this was partially because we had some more high cloud cover than anticipated earlier in the day on Friday, and that inhibited convection and prevented us from really reaching the most optimal conditions for thunderstorm development. Nevertheless, storms did finally develop early on Saturday for many areas. Here's the Storm Prediction Center's storm reports map for yesterday. Unusually, most of the severe weather in the country was over the northwest. Very unusual. We had ping-pong ball-sized hail near Bend. We had reports of damaging winds in southeastern Washington, northeastern Oregon, winds gusting into the mid-80s, wider spread wind gusts of 60, even to 70 miles an hour. Very unusual day. In southern Oregon, we did have some lightning strikes, but our thunderstorm activity in the Rogue Valley was, of course, not really very much compared to what went on the east side of the Cascades. So let's review the month as a whole. This map here, the precipitation anomaly map from the PRISM Climate Group out of OSU, does not reflect yesterday's heavy rainfall. So this is still showing rainfall in the Rogue Valley of between 70 and 90%. Yesterday's rainfall boosted us to well above average for the month. So it's been a pretty wet month. It hasn't been appreciably warmer or cooler than normal, so it's been a pretty average month temperature-wise. Rainfall, though, like I said, partially because of yesterday, has been significantly above average. Here's our current satellite image from the GOES West satellite. There's some clouds over the area still, but on the whole, it's a nice, partly sunny day. So what can we expect going forward? Here's our current 500 millibar map. You can see here's our system departing to the north, and this trough is in the process of splitting. A piece of energy is going to the north, and a piece of it is diving to the south and east. One of the reasons why we experienced such a potent storm system yesterday was because the Southern Oscillation Index rose pretty sharply over the last few days. And you can see here our sea surface temperatures have risen over the past few days, but we're still sort of in very weak La Nina territory now. And a positive Southern Oscillation Index is an indication that the atmosphere is in a La Nina-like state. This is a pretty high Southern Oscillation Index value. So again, they take the pressure difference between Tahiti and Darwin in Australia to calculate this index. And it gives you an idea of what the pressure patterns are, and which way the trade winds are going, what is the anomaly for easterly trade winds. And so the atmosphere is in a La Nina-like state, and interestingly, if we look at our correlation map for geopotential height with the SOI, we see that a positive SOI, so a La Nina-like state, is correlated with troughing or storminess over our area during this time of year. So very interesting that spike in the SOI lined up with the strong system that we saw yesterday. So as we head into the middle of this week, this flat ridge starts to build in over much of the western United States. The reason for this, I think, is that our PNA, our Pacific North American Index, is going to fall pretty rapidly over the next few days. Now, this might seem counterintuitive because usually during the wintertime and other parts of the year, a negative PNA is associated with troughing over our area of the country, but not really so during this time of year, especially the transition time between May and June. A negative PNA is actually going to give us this kind of a signal with ridging building in over much of the western US. And that's very similar to the GEFS Ensemble's 500 millibar forecast for the middle of the week. So interesting to see the connection between the PNA and our weather. However, by the weekend, the GEFS Ensemble wants to bring troughing back into our area with a good chance of showers for Saturday and especially Sunday. The reason for this is the atmospheric angular momentum. Once again, that's also a very important factor for our weather in this area of the country, and a lot of other areas as well. Here is the AAM forecast according to the CFSV2. There are 4 members here. See the dip that's expected to occur in a couple of days? A negative angular momentum during the month of June gives us this kind of a pattern. There's a strong signal for troughing over the Pacific Northwest. So that explains why the models are showing a return to troughing and storminess for the weekend. Now, beyond that, let's look at our Madden-Julian oscillation. Some models show this kind of a scenario. This is the European model. They show the MJO very slowly working its way into phase 2. Other models show this progression to be a little bit faster, so we'll have to see what happens, but there are quite a few models that show a very slow progression in phase 2. Some of them, like the NSET models, actually want to keep it into phase 1. But I think the overall message that we can get from all of these models is kind of a slower MJO progression. So MJO phase 2 is a cooler and wetter signal for our area. So that does line up with the angular momentums trend as well. However, I think in about a week's time, the angular momentum is probably going to be driving the car and not the MJO. It looks like many models, especially those that are produced by the European Center, want to take the MJO into the null phase, so make it less influential. Here is a similar correlation 200 millibar map, except this is from the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center. Again, similar look with troughing over the Pacific Northwest. So the MJO isn't going to be as much of an influence, but I think the influence that it does have is just going to reinforce the angular momentum's tendency for troughing, again, for this coming weekend. So here is all of that information displayed for you very clearly by the Weather Channel. Here you can see our warming trend for the middle of the week as that ridge builds in, and then a return to showers for the weekend. So beyond that, what are we thinking will happen? Well, here are all 3 of the major ensembles for day 10. You can see the European and the GEFS both have some kind of a ridge developing to the south, to the southwest of us. Some form of troughing moving through the Rockies and Northern Plains, and some form of ridging hanging on over the Great Lakes. The GEPS, the Canadian ensemble, doesn't really build this southwest ridge in as quickly and brings us more under the influence of this trough. I'm inclined to go with the EPS and the GEFS for one major reason, and that's the PNA. It's supposed to stay negative for a good part of the next 2 weeks. And once again, that gives us this kind of a signal in June with the southwest ridge and troughing heading more into the central part of the United States and the northern plains. So that lines up very well with what these top 2 ensembles are showing. So I'd expect that after this weekend, when we see another batch of showers, we could warm up and dry out again, similar to what we're going to experience the next few days. So we could basically see a repeat, possibly next week, of the weather we're going to have this week. When we look even farther out in time, here are the Canadian and American ensembles for day 16. This is as far out as the ensembles will go. The American ensemble wants to keep more of a trough over our area, while the Canadian wants to bring us more under the influence of this ridge that builds over the Four Corners and then pushes toward California and the West Coast. Now, I think both of the models do have some legitimacy. The GEPS wants to take us toward this negative PNA pattern that I was talking about just a few moments ago, that favors more troughing over the central part of the United States and the Great Lakes, and a little bit more ridging over California and the desert Southwest. So that is a possibility if the PNA does remain negative. However, the GEFS also has some support, in particular from the angular momentum. Here is the negative angular momentum signal that we would expect for June, and that's very similar to what the GEFS is showing. At this point, I'm going to side with the GEFS because there's a pretty robust signal for the angular momentum to fall once again toward the middle of the month, and the signal for the PNA is a little bit more mixed. So I'd expect these cooler and wetter conditions to hang on through the middle of the month at least. So let's recap all of that information. We did see record-breaking rainfall for some locations, including Medford and Roseburg yesterday, so very remarkable, and that event pushed our precip for the month to well above average in Medford. For the month as a whole, we saw near average temperatures. It was quite a pleasant month. For the week ahead, we can expect some pleasant warming midweek. I'm not expecting anything crazy, but highs in the mid-80s, according to the Weather Channel, are likely, and that's because our PNA is going to fall. But we will have some showers returning for the weekend, and once again, I think that's because the angular momentum is going to fall as well, and that's a signal for showers and cooler air for our area at this time of year. In the longer term, it looks like during the middle of next week, we could see, again, a midweek warmer spell, but then cooler conditions for that weekend and throughout the middle of the month as the AAM falls again. So it looks like the overall pattern we'll see this week and next week is going to be pretty consistent. Midweek warming and then cooler and cloudier conditions for the weekend. I think the overall theme for the first half of this month is going to be kind of a push and pull between a ridge to the south of us and a trough to the north of us. And this might end up being the theme for a good part of the summer. So guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to set your notifications so you don't miss that next weekend update. And please leave a like if you enjoyed the forecast. Write something in the comments. I would love to hear from you.